Good evening. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Tuesday, my favorite day of the week. Welcome all who are here and those who will join us later on. I want to remind everyone before we get into today's topic what we last spoke about the last time that we were on screen. So, the last time we were here, I was joined by Jessica Fontanez, and we spoke about how social media and the media in general plays a role in domestic violence and how it affects victims, survivors, their families, and everyone by what they portray in the media and how people use social media to stalk or just look for their victims. You know, no one is safe no matter where you go. They say that all the time. Watch where you check into. Don't put too much on social media. So that was the last conversation that we had when we were here. Today, we are going to talk about politics. That's always like a crazy subject for folks, right? Just like religion. When you bring it up, people are like, oh, let's not talk about it. But every time we're on here, we make sure that we have topics that people want to hear about. So before we get into today's topic, I want to do a few rules like I normally do when we have topics that make it a little bit, ooh. I want to remind folks that we are not choosing any political parties. We are not speaking about Democrats, Republicans. That's not what tonight's conversation about. Though you may see some video footage that may show our current president and different people within the political scheme. I want everyone to know that our show is not politic based, and we do not say we are either for this candidate, that candidate. I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. That is not what tonight is about. What we want to talk about are legislate, the laws, and just things that people don't talk about when it comes to domestic violence, especially within politics. So let's keep an open mind. Let's listen and do as we always do. I always have my glass of vino so that we can make sure we're a little laid back and we don't get so serious. Sit down, enjoy the night. I want to remind folks who are watching tonight, as I always do, the number for the domestic violence hotline is scrolling across the bottom of our screen, 1-800-799-7233. You can also reach out to us at loveshouldnothurt.com or any of our social media platforms. Remember that if you need to dial 911, do not be afraid if your abuser around. You can ask for a pizza. You can say you need to talk to customer service. There are folks on the other end who are trained individuals to ask the correct questions to get you the help that you need. So please, please, please never be scared to call. Reach out when you need that help. So today, I'm excited. I've known this mujer for a long time, and she is another Fierra Latina who is doing things in our community and has forever, for as long as I remember seeing her. She has always done amazing things in our community, and especially in the political scheme. Hello, Christina Lopez. We see you. Welcome. So tonight, I am welcoming a fabulous human being, an amazing Latina who's doing her thing and always has been, and who has been a great support of Love Shouldn't Hurt since the day that we started. I want to welcome Quetzy Lozada to the screen tonight. I hope that she is excited about joining us tonight. Hello, Quetzy.
Hello, how are you? Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be here.
I'm good. How are you? How you feeling? You feeling that little energy pump? Don't mind all my energy because I'm hype every week. If you haven't seen it.
I'm getting all those vibes. Yes, I am. I am. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Well, I always say that I'm excited to have guests on that I know, right? Because when I go on other shows like Bomba Live with Ralph and I'm with other, you know the people, you get to know them, but you don't know them, right? So I know you. So it's better when you know the person, you feel more comfortable. So you have been super supportive since the beginning, since I started this foundation. Let people know a little bit about your background. Why is it you're even getting people saying hello tonight. Tell us
Hello,
about
everybody.
tell us about your background and what it is that you do.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm honored to be here today. I'm hoping to learn as much from you and the audience as many people have said that they've learned from you by listening to you either at your events or by listening to your program here. And so I'm really excited to be here. I'm sure that I'm going to walk away with a lot more than I'm probably going to be able to give to folks. But as you said, I've worked my entire life in the Latino community. I am currently the vice president of organizing at Esperanza. But prior to me arriving at Esperanza, I worked for Councilwoman Maria Quiñones Sanchez for 13 years. And then I transitioned over to the district attorney's office for a little bit. But during my entire time in public service, my work has always been in the Latino community, serving constituents in an array of different needs, domestic violence and family related issues and concerns are among those types of services.
Awesome. Wow. 13 years. I didn't realize you spent that much time with Maria.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
long
And
time.
it doesn't seem that long when you're in the circle, right? When I first got there, I thought I'll be here 5 years and I'll be moving on. When I first got there, I had no clue what council people did and was not involved in politics at all.
Yeah,
But you get brought into it and you start to learn and you start to see the need in the community and it makes you want to
definitely.
stay.
Definitely, definitely. So, my I have a million questions. Everybody knows, right? I always have 1,000 things that I want to ask. Um, but my first question that I want to ask, and like I said, people keep an open mind, and even yourself keep an open mind. This is a what do I say? So when I'm on Bomba Live, and I know you've been on a lot of different places. There's always like this strategic, like very you have to say this. So know that we say everything. We don't hold anything back. We don't worry about offending because that's why I feel like we bring a truth to the platform because we're able to be very transparent. So I'm hoping we can do the same tonight. Of course, without offending anyone. So my first question is, how do you think that politics has played a role in domestic violence or the lack of?
I think when I think about that question, at times, and again, I'm being completely honest, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
not related to any particular person or party,
Yeah.
like you said. I don't think that domestic violence plays enough of a role in the public arena or in the political arena. I have seen domestic violence be a sexy topic at times when something major happens in the community,
Right.
and we saw it recently, right, with the Me Too movement,
Yeah.
where everybody jumped on board and politicians from across the nation
Yes.
got involved and started to talk about domestic violence and family related issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it plays a role in the sense that um, politicians present resolutions, and a resolution, for those that don't know, it's almost like a policy that's put in place to address or recognize a specific topic or issue or event.
Yeah.
And so I think legislations or resolutions have been passed where they recognize the Domestic Violence Awareness Month, or where um, small funding is given to different organizations for outreach, or trainings are made available. But I don't think that legislation that really that really enforces uh, some of the needs that are associated with domestic violence. I don't believe personally that politics supports it the way that it should.
Right.
If there's a legislation, there's a lack of enforcement.
Yeah.
If
Follow
there
through.
is one or the other, there's not funding. And so I don't think that, as far as politics is concerned, we've come to a really solid place um, when we have to, as it relates to addressing domestic violence.
Right. I agree. I think that even throughout the years prior to myself starting this organization and putting myself on such a platform and being so openly like ambitious with it, I never really saw it anywhere else, honestly, and that's what has driven me to continue with the follow through and continue to keep doing what I do because I feel like community members, different people within politics, politicians, this should not be something that's spoken about just when some major event happens. It should be something that's spoken about all the time because it happens in our homes every day. It's not like there's love, there's victims that we see almost every other day, as sadly as it sounds, in the news. They're killed by their husband, killed by an intimate partner, or a neighbor came and the person was dead. It happens so much that you would think, wow, since it happens, there should be a lot more discussed about this. There should be policies. I sat at a roundtable discussion with Senator Casey last year or the year before, and he there was so many people there that were passionate and who talked about it, and then it was like that was it. I never
Yeah,
heard anything about it again. And
yeah,
it kills me, because I feel like there should be so much more out there for people. And I think it's a lack of, honestly, I think it's a lack of people believing that and maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but my own personal opinion, a lack of people believing that there's a great need for it. If that sounds correct, I feel like, it's needed in the moment because this just happened. It's major. Let's talk about it on the news. Let's talk about it in the media. Let's bring it up and let's do all these different things. But then once the storm has passed and it's quiet again, it's like, okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, the Me Too movement is a perfect example of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Me Too became popular, and like I said, it became a nationwide slogan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody jumped on board. Everybody was talking about domestic violence. Everybody was encouraging women to speak up,
Yeah.
and talk about their experiences. And then it kind of died down.
Yeah.
But and it makes you think, Me Too is here and everybody's talking, but what happened prior to that? What happened when women were stepping up without all of
Right.
the noise,
Yeah.
right? What happened to that time, and why didn't we feel that it was important at that point?
Absolutely.
And was it because women that were in a specific industry were saying, "This is me, and I'm a victim,"
Yeah.
right? And why? And if that's the case, why is it that people felt that they were more important than the everyday woman or immigrant who lives in this type of situation?
Absolutely.
And so it makes you, it's a little bit frustrating. And it also makes you think about, you know, how do we organize? How do you get women organized in organizations like yours,
Mhm.
using your platforms? How do you get them to align themselves with a politician that
Yeah.
understands the severity of domestic violence and
Mhm.
really pushes through legislation that is going to be an everyday type of topic, right? Not
Right.
just when someone in our community is killed or when someone famous says that we should be talking about this.
Right. Absolutely. So my next question, and it hits close to home. um, so you worked in politics for years. So anyone that follows my show and follows my organization knows how it began. So not only did I live through a tremendous ordeal in my own entire life of having to live through domestic violence, but I was quiet, and I was quiet for a very long time because, as Hispanics, as minorities, we're taught, lo que pasa en la casa se queda en la casa. And it happens, we deal with it, and then we act like it never happened. We just move on in life, right? We don't talk about it. So for years, I pretty much stayed shut. I really felt like there was no need for me to discuss it. Other people weren't talking about it. Why should I talk about it? But unfortunately, a traumatic event, almost now, well, it's 2.5 years now, is what started my organization because I was so close to the situation that it was like, okay, something has to be done because I'm not going to lose another friend or another family member to this because people are quiet and nobody's doing anything about it. So what I'm referring to, for people who are watching, people who know me know that my organization is dedicated to Linda Rios. Um, See, I haven't gotten emotion in weeks. I'm getting emotional today and I haven't in weeks. um, After being there that day and having to tell my best friend that her Komai was just killed, and being there like with the police on the scene that morning before even her mother was there, and just kind of seeing the craziness, it was kind of my wake up call. It was like I didn't talk about it. She dealt with it. She didn't talk about it. And unfortunately, a life was lost. And it happens every day. It just so happens that she was someone that was a part of my life. So it made a significant effect on me, right? She was not, and I say this all the time, she wasn't one of my best friends. She was my best friend's good friend. And because of that, we were in the same situations all the time at each other's family parties. I took pictures at her stepdaughter's sweet 16. I was around her when she had her daughters. She came to a party of mine. I took pictures for her. So she became a part of my life through my best friend. So that's how I knew her and started to grow and learn about her throughout the years. And then we went partying together and all the things you do, when you're young, drank together, had fun together. So because this terrible situation happened and I was in the midst of it that day, and I'll never forget that day, it's what opened the door for me to say, I'm doing something. I'm going to open my mouth. I'm going to start this organization. I'm going to put out this documentary so that people see familiar faces and they can say, wow, Christina went through that. Zulma went through that. Jackie went through that. let's start talking about it. Let's bring it up. So I bring that up to say you worked around Linda. You worked in City Hall. You saw Linda constantly. And I know it's difficult, and we don't have to get into details, but I know that it was a difficult time. So my question for you is, knowing Linda personally, knowing about her during that time and then learning of it after, how much did domestic violence come up prior to her death? Honestly.
I mean, I think honestly, in the office, unless a constituent came in, male or female, right? Because I have to be very honest, we've had some men who have come in
Absolutely.
to the office to talk about situations that they were in. If it wasn't brought up by a constituent, it really wasn't discussed, right? I mean, I think that, um, again, unless something happens in the community and in the neighborhood, is there not a buzz about it in political offices? You always think about, or you always talk about it during Women's History Month, and what can we do, and how do we bring awareness around different topics. But other than that, it wasn't really discussed. And going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, when Linda passed away, which is, you know, to me is difficult. I talked to Linda almost daily. She was my go-to person, right? When I needed direction, she's who I went to, and so um, I was close to her, right? I considered her a friend,
Yeah.
and not being able to recognize any of those signs,
Hmm.
um, it's hard to
Difficult.
deal with.
Yeah.
It's hard to even think about her and think about how did you not recognize that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that once it happened to her, because so many people felt about Linda the way that I do,
Hmm.
I think people start to question who else around us is in those types of situations, and what do we do, and how do we recognize those situations, and
Right.
what questions should we be asking. I think that for a long time that did happen,
Hmm.
um, but I don't think it happened for long enough. Again, I think that you know conversations need to be continuous, and they're uncomfortable conversations. Like you said, what happens in the four walls of our home, we're taught that they stay there,
Hmm.
especially in Latino families, right? In
Absolutely.
Latino families, uno no dice lo que pasó aquí, porque
Yes.
te meto en la cara. That was my mom, right?
Yeah.
Abres la boca y te voy a meter en la boca, right? So, I think that there has to be more people like you, more organizations like yours that say, let us bring this conversation to the table every opportunity we have. We
Yes.
shouldn't just wait for Domestic Violence Month. We shouldn't wait for events like, Women's History or Hispanic Heritage. None of those times should we wait. We should take every opportunity that we have, particularly opportunities where we're in front of people that can change, that can make a
Make
change,
changes. Yes.
right? Legislation at the municipal level is really difficult to put into place
Hmm.
unless you have state and federal government support. And so our council people can pass 100 resolutions. They can put into place a ton of different things, but they will never go anywhere if you don't get support from other levels of government. And so as women, I think that we need to take advantage of the fact that if we're invited to a table, what is important to us? Let us make sure that we leave it on that table, and that everyone around that table understands that something as serious as domestic violence needs to be spoken about all of the time. Because when I can identify a face with a certain situation, it makes a difference. It makes it important to me, right?
Absolutely.
And so, someone like you being at the table in front of Senator Casey, or in front of any other politician, and making sure that your voice is heard, and that the passion behind it is felt when you walk away. That's really important.
Absolutely. That is. Thank you for that. I see that Mr. Collazo has joined us. So I have the distinct pleasure, as always. He's going to join us on the screen. It's always, like I said, amazing to have people on. So I have to do this because it's public, right? Everybody's watching. So I do this show primarily because my brother, who is about to join us, Rey Collazo, is who pushed me to do this, right? So I have always been passionate about my organization and what it is that I do, but I didn't have the passion to get in front of the screen. And thanks to him, I've had that run. I ran with it. I did it, and now I do it every week. And when I miss it, I get really mad. So
You're amazing at it. I don't know why you have a problem. This is natural.
thank you. So again, I'm excited to welcome. We did a Christmas show together, but this is his realm, people. He knows his politics. So I am welcoming my big brother, Reco Yasso, to the screen.
Good evening, buenas noches. You know, I know how I had to
Hey,
get it in too with the
Hola.
fun. We had fun at the parranda. Now
we did.
I was prepared. I have my coquito. You had the instruments. We brought the music. Good evening, everybody. You know what's so funny about this
Hello.
podcast thing? You always talk the same. It's like deja vu because a couple years ago, the person that and I know how to talk, but one of the great talkers I know is Chrissy, right? Yeah, I'm shy. I don't know. We're going on your show and the radio station, and now look, right? La misma vez, what happened this afternoon with Quetzy on the email? Oh, I'm a little shy. I don't know. Like, Quetzy and talking? Come on now. I
I
don't think
know.
if you
I
were shy,
really,
girl. And you, of
I
the three of us, you're
hate
the
this.
most blunt. You the most blunt. You
That's
keep it
not always a
real.
good thing, though. That's not always a good thing. That gets me in
It's good
trouble.
for the ratings. You know what I'm saying?
She
Come
said
on.
it gets her in trouble. You're so
It
funny.
does.
It's all right. Any publicity is good publicity. But
That's
anyway, it's
right.
a pleasure to be here. And, whatever I can add to this conversation, the most important thing is that our people know, and it's not just women, as you've talked about on the show, Chrissy, but that our vulnerable population knows that we're with them and that we have leaders like Quetzy and Christina out there that are there to support them 100% on a lot of different levels. And, I'd like to add, kind of the national perspective into this conversation.
Thank you. So, what I do with everyone who comes on, normally, you're not normally on that end of the stick, right? You're usually the one running this. I like it. I like it. I'm in control. I'm joking.
Yeah, I know that hurt during the barranda. Well, I know you were like, damn, I'm kind
Oh.
of. It's tough when you book the entertainment. You have to direct.
No, it's okay. I want people to know who Reiko Yasso is. So I talk about you all the time on my show, and I always say that you're the person who gave me the push, but people do not know who Reiko Yasso is. And I thought that this topic was
Yeah.
important, and I thought that you should be here because if anyone besides you and Quetzy, I don't know. Quetzy's worked through it for years, and so have you. So please tell us about your background in
Well,
politics.
let's
What it is
talk
that you
about
do.
it. This is like being on the stoop back in the days because I grew up at Fifth and Pike. If people remember, right across from Porky's Point, there was always that bar on the corner. I was 2 doors from the corner.
Mhm.
And way back, the 80s hunting park heads would remember when Quetzy was a little girl at St. Hugh's, would remember the ice cream parlor de la Barranquilla. That was my family's business, and we lived upstairs. So I want my Philly people to know that, I'm Philly, North Philly first and foremost. And then, I've been blessed with educational opportunities and just the way life went because I like politics and organizing and stuff that I've basically done political organizing on a local and national level my career. And so, I currently am the political director for Unidos US, which used to be National Council of La Raza. So even though I still live in the Philly area, my stuff is, and I still do some work here and there in Philly with Quetzy and community people. I've been doing political organizing for some time, and we focus a lot on federal legislation. What
Mhm.
Quetzy does is so important because Quetzy is such a guru on local municipal laws and not just that, but how to work through the government systems. So the implementation of this stuff, we need people like Quetzy, but sort of on a federal level, that's usually where I sort of monitor and advocate around. But yeah, I mean, it's what I tell people is that one of the great lessons of my life was that when I started doing this work nationally and I started going to the White House and I started traveling all over the country, wasn't a sweat because once I got in those rooms, I realized how well Philly prepared me.
Mhm.
And doing politics with Councilwoman Quinones and Quetzy and my OGs like my parents and Juan Ramos and the people that Nelson Diaz, the people that brought me up. And I take all those lessons from the heart, And it's funny because Quetzy, I guess you grew up below. Where'd you grow up, Quetzy? Around St. Hughes, but where did you grow up? What block?
No, honey, I grew up in Hunting Park on 7th and Butler.
Okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Hello.
right
So
around
I
the
was all
corner.
right. So I'm Fifth and Pike. There's 11th and Erie, 7th and Butler. So I want people to get out of this
We
too,
were all in the
especially
same hood.
the people that grew up
Yes.
with us. Like that neighborhood produced a lot of people, and
Yeah.
we think all bad, negative, but we also have to think of the beauty and the our parents were all jibaritos and all that. They
That's
pumped
it.
out people that really have achieved. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's part of the message today. But that's where my political background comes into play.
So you joined us. Quetzy was talking about her experience with, the political background, and we just spoke
Okay.
about Linda Rios because she's the reason why this organization was started, and she was a friend of Quetzy's as well. She worked with her.
Yeah.
She saw her every day.
Whew.
Um, so we talked about how that affected us. So you're already here, so I'm gonna throw you right in there.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, give us your thoughts. Go ahead.
well, I mean, the first thing is that, and I think it's a lesson from the male perspective, because I know for y'all it was a shock, and I don't know, obviously y'all were intimately connected. You were like family with those people,
Mhm.
and but it, from what I gathered, I didn't know them like that, but that it was like a surprise. And so I think one of the things that we need to learn from women, but also we need to and experts, but that men have to be able to find the clues amongst other men in their family and their friendship network so that they can intervene and
Mhm.
be like, hey man, if and it's hard because the issue of mental health, and I don't know the exact circumstance with this gentleman that did this horrific thing that killed himself, but that mental health obviously is a factor in all these things, and
Mhm.
so that's not only a taboo subject in our community, but it's a taboo subject with men, in
Mhm.
period. So I think as a lesson for men is that we have to look out for our brothers and our cousins and our homies, so that we can identify if we see something that's astray. And look, I've checked myself on it too because I've missed a lot of things in my life. We've talked about it on
Mhm.
my show, Chrissy, that I didn't see you, but I knew something was up. But she's a grown woman, ain't my business. I don't know what's going on for real, for real. Like
Mhm.
you find all these excuses in your mind not to do something or say something, and so we have to find more courage to, especially man to man, to try to help intervene so that it doesn't get to that point. So if someone needs an intervention, whether it's legal or health wise, that we can be there to support and make sure the person knows if they're suicidal or they're having these thoughts. Like it's not a stigma.
Right.
It's not a stigma to look for help and cry for help. To seek out mental health and just health services as a man, and that can be difficult. So that was the big lesson I got from that tragedy personally.
Right.
I think that you make a good point, Ray, but I think that a lot of times, as guys, you guys hang around, you talk a lot, um, and I don't think that sometimes guys think that it's cool. I put my hands on her, and the other guys are like, ha ha ha, come on, man, you shouldn't be doing that, right?
Yeah.
But there's never a very serious conversation about the no, you really should not be doing that kind of thing, right? There's never there's almost like the machismo piece of it kind of gets in the way, and it is celebrated.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong. I said to Christina earlier that we as constituent service representatives in council offices have heard from men and women, right,
Oh
who
yeah.
are in situations where they feel that they're being abused. Um, but in both situations, um, their group, their circle of folks that really should be correcting them and putting them in a more appropriate road kind of praise and celebrate the fact that she put her hands on you, and that makes her strong and tough because she's not taking no mess from you, right? And on the other end, you put
That's
your
real.
hands on her and you cool, right? You got your respect from her,
Yeah.
when really both of them are absolutely wrong.
That's
And
right.
and and again, I go back to when we are invited to tables, those types of situations should be checked.
Well, there's
Neither
a
one of them is
yeah,
correct, right? Neither
yeah.
one of them should be celebrated, because both of them are inappropriate.
It's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting you say that, Ketsy, because I don't know how other people feel watching this. I'd be curious to see what Ray and some of the other fellows watching this think, because I feel like it feels like nothing changes and then it changes overnight.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, look, even till a few years ago, let's keep it real. The phrase "wife beater" for the T-shirts was like okay to say,
Mhm.
like just in passing. You see it on TV or you just say it. Not that you even thinking that way or you were into that. But that's so just how many things it feels like things have changed quickly, but it takes a long time, right?
Yeah.
So I think the difference, Ketsy, that I've seen I'm only around certain people, but that I don't think it's as acceptable to applaud the behavior, but I think a lot of guys don't know how to react when someone says something. So what's the language? Either they don't have the courage or they don't even know how to intervene. All right, so if my uncle says something, I'm 19, he's 30, he's 42. He makes a comment. Who am I to say something? I know it's wrong. I wasn't taught that way. Or maybe, maybe he's just saying that to look tough. So I think the key is that not only to create the awareness, but that to help guys with not only the courage but the language. Like, how do you approach a situation? Because look, for real, what a guy doesn't want to pick a fight over it. Like, so what's the, because they may feel in a situation like afraid, not afraid, but not want to be caught up in any drama. So I think it's about giving men the tools to deal with it. Because on some level, the answer might be you got to make a call to some to the cops, or to another authority that can deal with it, because it could be a dangerous situation for anyone involved. So I think we're getting there, but you're right. We have to empower men to have the tools to be able to address it in real time.
Right. So since we're talking about politics tonight, I wanted to bring up a super important um, act that was formed, because I mean, I think it's even more super important to me because Biden is now our president. And he is the one who enacted this act when he was just a senator in 1990. So I want to talk about the Violence Against Women Act. I know that, Ralph, you're familiar with that. I'm sure, Quetzy,
Sure.
you're familiar with that. My question for you, Ralph, thinking of VAWA and thinking of, when the Violence Against Women Act began, since he's our president, my question is, do you think with our current presidential administration, we're in better hands when it comes to domestic violence and their laws?
Well, it's interesting because there's a couple things with VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, is that when he was running for president, he reminded people of his leadership when it was enacted in the late '80s, early '90s, in the Clinton years when he was in the Senate, and
Right.
he did play a pretty important role in moving that forward. And it's been renewed and changed for the better, and now the Senate needs to renew it. So I think that does in a sense, because I think he's going to make it a priority for the Senate to reauthorize it. The House reauthorized it several times, and when the Republicans controlled the Senate, they just dropped it. I think what's important for people to understand about VAWA is, first of all, again, going back to not too long ago, like '80s, as late as 20, 25 years ago, before this law was passed, a lot of police forces didn't want to get involved with domestic skirmishes because they were like, oh, that's the family business. And
Right.
back then, it was even more sexist policing in our society. So women weren't even 25 years ago, 30 years ago, that wasn't like long ago. Women weren't even encouraged to even press charges or even call the cops not too long ago. So these laws also set a tone for the culture of our society and our policing and how we, in law and order. And so that's changed quite a bit. And the other thing that's important about that law is that they've added pieces
Mhm.
to address issues like domestic violence situations within the LGBT community,
Right.
or provide more protections for undocumented. And I know, Quetzy, you see this every day in your work in the community, is that an undocumented woman that's with a documented male partner is in danger, because at any time, if he roughs her up, he could always be like, well, you're a phone call away from being out of here, and
Right.
keep that threat. And then on the flip side, is the woman as an undocumented person comfortable going to the police for anything, much less domestic violence, with her mixed status partner? So these federal laws have really helped move the civil rights agenda as much as just the women's rights agenda in this space. And it's one of these things where, even though it's still on the books, we'd like to see it strengthened by the Senate reauthorizing it. Now it's it's 50-50, but Democrats technically control the Senate. We certainly have a better chance of renewing that conversation.
So while we're on this, I want to come back because there's a few things that you mentioned that I want to bring back up, but I have a short video to play, which speaks about exactly what we're talking about. So I wanted to show it because I want people to get a better understanding, because there's not a lot of people who are familiar with VAWA or how it even helps women. So I want to play our first video so that you guys can see that, and we'll come back to those topics.
Those who've been around a while with me know that I quote my father all the time, who literally would say, the the greatest sin that could be committed, the cardinal sin of all sins, was the abuse of power. And the ultimate abuse of power is for someone physically stronger and bigger to raise their hand and strike and beat someone else. In most cases, that tends to be a man striking a woman, or a man or woman striking a child. That's the fundamental premise and the overarching reason why John Conyers and I and others started so many years ago to draft the legislation called the Violence Against Women Act. It passed 19 years ago, and that's why we shortly thereafter instituted a hotline where women in distress could call for help. I remember, John, when we did that hotline, it was like, well, you know, it'll be useful, but I'm not so sure how much it will be used. Well, the truth of the matter is it's been used a lot and saved a lot of lives. Over 2 million women have had the courage to try to get out of earshot of their abuser, escape from the prison of their own home, to pick up that phone and call to a line that you had no idea who on the other end was going to answer, and to say, I'm in trouble. Can you help me? Can you help me? I love those men that would say when we started this about why don't they just leave? Well, if they had 1/3 the courage that those women, those 2 million women had who picked up the phone and called, not knowing what to expect, we'd be a whole lot better nation. We built a network of shelters that are immediately available to women in need because we found out that the vast majority of children who are homeless on the street, as Nancy knows and others, were there because their mothers were abused. Imagine fleeing for your life with only the clothes on your back and your child in your arms. The shelter is their only lifeline. And it's
Wow. I saw Quetzy. I want to get your feedback really quick because I saw your face when he said how many women they've saved since then.
Yeah. 2 million women, it's impactful, right? And how many of those women live amongst us?
Exactly.
And how many times have we missed the signs?
Yeah.
You know, knowing the resources that are out there, and knowing the number of women who live in situations like that and are still afraid, because they don't believe that they are that courageous.
Absolutely.
It's just, it does something deep inside, right? It almost makes me feel like every time I have an opportunity to speak to women, I want to be able to say to them, if you're going through something, know that I'm here. Know that there are resources. Know that there's help. And know that if you dig deep, the courage is there.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to one of Ray's comments. I have a picture. I sat down with Senator Casey 2 years ago. I have a picture with him, put it up there. There I go. I had to put he's there, I'm there. Not a great picture. I was chubby. But I sat at this roundtable discussion, and he had a different question for every single person. And it brings me to something that Ralph said. He asked everyone something different. And his question to me was, if you had to make changes, what would your specific changes be within your community on law enforcement? So my response to him was to, one, across the board, have a lot more trainings, sympathy trainings, just trainings across the board with the people who answer the phones, the operators, with the police officers who arrives at the scene. Because a lot of times these women turn away from even saying, yes, I'm being abused, because when they go to precincts or they're speaking to police officers, there's a lot of victim blaming that happens. So, just desensitizing and showing police officers and all law enforcement, you must go through this sort of training prior to, dealing with the domestic violence. Now, I know that there's training. I know that there are, because I've spoken to law enforcement officials, and I have a lot of people who help me from the, district attorney's office, and police officers who I can call at the drop of a dime and say, listen, what help do you need? But they themselves have said there's not enough. So my response to him was, I think that, you are senator. You have you're not a mayor. You're one of the senators. You have the stronger forces to be able to say, listen, across the board, across our nation, 2 million women, like, people don't think that it's a big deal, but 2 million women is a lot of women. To sit there and say, wow, all of those women in different parts of our states have dealt with that. So my biggest issue was police need to have, more sensitivity. They need to know how to treat the victim instead of making them feel like, it was done because of something they may have done or something they have said, or what did you wear that day? So, like, learning what types of wording to say to them and things like that. And I brought it up because Ralph spoke about law enforcement, because that was super big for me that day, because there were so many law enforcement officials in the room. I wanted to make sure that it was heard. And I had police officers come to me and shake my hand and say, thank you for what you're doing. And thank you that you're a Latina who's doing it, because there's not enough people in the minority scene who's actually bringing this to light. And he said, honestly, I've dealt with it a lot of times. The one officer that I spoke to, a male, an African-American, he said, I've dealt with it oftentimes when I've had to go out on DV calls. He said, and if I've had a long night, honestly, I don't know how friendly I've been, because he's telling me something and he just got out of work. He's dressed nicely. He's in a suit. So for me, it's like, here we go on another domestic call. And I, as nicely as I could, indirectly was like, you suck. Because it doesn't matter how tired you are or how nicely dressed he is. Every situation should be treated the same. Go in there and be sensitive. Because if you make them feel, I know I lived it. I've walked into police stations where they've told me, well, you don't have a bruise. What's that mean? Because I didn't have a bruise, he didn't just whoop my ass? No, it doesn't mean that. So I think that for me, it's super important for legislate and Senate. And that's why people say, why are you doing this? I'm doing this because it's not just here. I don't want to just deal with it in Philly. I want to deal with it everywhere, because it's super important that people understand 2 million women have utilized that act to be able to get out. 2 million women is just what he knows of. What about all of the people that they don't know about? The women who don't talk about it. Really quickly before Ralph, you share your. Well, you know what? Go ahead, share it. And
No. I'm actually going to ask Quetzy a question, because there's very few public servants that have that relationship and connect, with the police force, especially in Philadelphia. I mean, you work with them on a variety of issues, and you keep close communication with them. So I want to ask you, like, what is your experience in terms of educating and engaging the local police around this conversation? Because they may say something like, well, we don't have resources for that, or there's a conversation that happens. So I just want to get your experience, your take on that conversation, because you work a lot with the police.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate. I have a very close relationship with folks in East Division, and they put me in my place sometimes when I call them to curse them out about things that I think should be handled a certain way. I'm not a police officer, but I still feel like I'm going to curse you out, because I'm going to bring to you the perspective of the resident, the person who doesn't have a relationship with you. My cousin is a detective who was assigned to the domestic violence division for quite some time, and so it's always interesting to hear her perspective on different cases. She's the one who has made me aware that men suffer from domestic violence just as much as women do. And that you can't always walk in and believe the first person who speaks to you, right? Yes, they have always said that there is a need for resources. I mentioned to Christina earlier that sometimes when we talk about domestic violence, folks push the agenda, and there's changes to enforcement. And other times you push and there's resources and training made available. The police department has a mandate that every police officer takes domestic violence training. It's not an annual training. And so I think that for folks who work in that division, it needs to be. If you want to come here to work in this division, you need to understand every aspect of it. and my cousin was there. She might have gone to a training every 3 years, depending on when the resources were available.
Right.
And so it brings me back to when you're at a table in front of people who can make a change, in front of politicians or in front of legislators at whatever level, what is important to you needs to be brought up to the table, but you have to come to the legislator ready for your ask,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And ready to say, I'm asking you for this, and I'm going to support you, and I'm going to rally around you, and my group is going to rally around you in an effort to get this done. And I
No,
don't
and
think we have
yeah.
that enough.
No, and think about this is where diversity comes into play too, right? So having more women in the police force,
Mhm.
having more Latinas in the police force, because there's also things can be lost in translation,
Mhm.
you know, and this,
And
yeah,
losing the fear of not talking about it.
that's right.
Christina and I were talking about that earlier. Lo que pasa en tu casa se queda en tu casa. No, no, we have to pull away from that.
That's right.
Absolutely.
When I was 19, I had a boyfriend who punched me in my nose.
Mm,
And someone that I dated for 5 years of my life, and I never thought that would happen.
Mhm.
And I remember saying to myself, "Oh my God, did this man just hit me? I've never seen that in my house. How did that happen?"
Right.
mm,
And I can tell you, I'm 50 years old, long left this man, never have had contact with him, and my parents still don't know that happened.
Mhm.
wow,
Right?
Yeah.
It
wow,
when I would meet people in the office who would talk to me about, I'm afraid to talk about it, I'm afraid to tell people that I'm living in this situation, I could totally relate.
Mhm.
mm,
I could totally relate. But we have to start talking to, especially our young girls, our teenagers, our young adults. You cannot be afraid. When you are experiencing something, you have to talk about it. If something is not right at home, it's okay to have that conversation with someone outside who you believe can change that.
Absolutely.
wow. First of all, Quetzy, I mean, thank you for your candor. That takes a lot to share. Let me ask you. I'm turning tables. I have all these questions for Quetzy on it. So, like, there. Look, I mean, this conversation, and it was being called, the whole defund the police thing turned everybody off, but the point of that conversation really was about how do we reimagine what policing looks like. As you're talking, I'm thinking, I almost feel like wouldn't the police welcome having support staff that are experts in that field that could go with them during those calls that could help kind of figure out what's going on so that they don't have to feel like because they're going to go through a training
They
once
have
in
a
a while.
partnership. They have a partnership with Women Against Abuse. They do have a partnership.
Okay,
I don't think that there's enough resources there
all
though,
right, so
right?
there you
And
go.
then
So
and then let's think about this. You have a partnership with one specific organization whose focus is women. And
Mhm.
so what happens to everybody else? What
Absolutely.
happens to the LGBTQ? What happens to the men?
Yeah.
yeah,
What happens to those folks?
that's a good
There's no
point.
representation. And so to them, it's always about, yes, we want to be supportive. Yes, we need more training, but we also need resources and we need people to speak up. We need people not to be afraid because a lot of times too what happens is that resources are drained on a person who has made a complaint, and then we've dumped all of these resources into this specific person, and then that person decides, I no longer want to go through this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
no
that's
longer want to show up
Follow
to
through.
court. I
Yeah.
no longer, I'm afraid, right? Because the police department may be there to serve a warrant, they may be able to arrest that individual, but you have other branches of government who are responsible for charging you and a judge that needs to determine what the result is going to be.
that's right.
And
Absolutely.
what happens if the police officers do their work and then you have another branch of government that doesn't follow through? What happens to this individual person, right? There is no funds um, to take that person to live somewhere else while that person is being served,
Mhm.
or while that person goes through the entire court proceeding. And so a lot of times there are resources that are drained because you have a repeat offender if you want, if, so to speak, right?
We'll
And
talk,
not that
yeah.
they're trying to do it intentionally, right? The person is afraid. They're trying to get out. But because the system doesn't support them, there's a break in the system somewhere, they continue to go back. And they go back more out of fear than out of really wanting to, feeling that they have to stay there, right?
Mhm.
So,
So I think that, yeah, police want to do that. There needs to be more organizations like this one, right, that say we don't just represent women, we represent
everyone.
people
Mhm.
in
Absolutely.
general.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So we have a lot of comments coming up. I have one more video I want to play. It is a woman who was impacted by the Violence Against Women Act and who actually is able to speak after her crazy ordeal. When we come back, we'll get into all of these comments so we can get feedback from our audience. Let's see that video.
I have a little scar. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here. It's right here. And that's where the bullet entered. And it came out right here, right above my eye. And you can't even see it now.
Every human being has certain fundamental rights. The most fundamental is the right to just be secure in our person, period.
About 5 years ago, I met this guy. His name was Derek Morris, and we went to high school together, and we were high school sweethearts, and we lived the high school dream.
Somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of all women experience violence in their lifetimes.
Right after high school, I got pregnant. We moved in together, and he started becoming abusive verbally. After a while, became physical.
Even today, people will say to me, you know, I just hate that battering happens, but why don't those women leave?
I didn't know how to leave. I was scared for my life. I was scared for my son's life.
Can we guarantee their safety when they leave? Until recently, I'd say leave and go where?
Eventually, I did leave him, but he was coming to my job. He was harassing me. He had broken out 3 windows in my car, my mom's back window in her car. After he had broken out the windows in my car, he came to my job and poured gasoline inside my car.
It used to be, if you were a battered woman and somehow were able to call the police or someone else called the police, they might very well arrive and say, what did you do to provoke him this time?
You know, I made various claims with the Fort Bend County Sheriff's Department. I made a lot of claims with Rosenberg PD, Richmond PD. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, the chief of police knew my name. It was that ridiculous. Yeah, August 19th of 06 was the day my life changed. All of a sudden, I just heard this noise. And, like, my body was vibrating. It was weird. And I realized he had shot me. I woke up 4 days later in ICU. They had covered all the mirrors in the room. They had covered even the paper towel canister because it could show a reflection of me. And I remember I was going to get a CT scan, and I was walking, and I saw a mirror, and I said, and I looked, and I didn't know who it was in the mirror.
Change means having a vice president who spent his career working to improve women's lives.
I met Joe Biden a long, long time ago because he was working on these issues. He wrote the Violence Against Women Act years before it passed. And every year he tried to get hearings and he tried to get it passed. And everybody said they were for it. But the truth is, they weren't. When it was time to count the votes and actually get this out of committee, the votes weren't there until President Clinton got elected in '92. It was really the very first time the federal government had ever spoken to issues of violence against women.
My ex was sentenced through that act, and he was punished through that act, and he got 25 years, and for 25 years, I'm carefree.
Wow.
Mm.
She was shot in her head and she survived that. That's amazing. So, my question to you guys, I'll give you guys the last question and then we'll go into comments. My question for both of you today is domestic violence a sign, in your opinion, that America's family values have declined? Ralph, you can go first.
No, Quetzy can go first.
Oh, Kelsey can go first.
I think it depends on who you ask, right? My family values may not be the same as yours,
Yeah.
and who am I to say that your values are broken down or are less than mine? I think that when I think about family, um, even in my own family, my the way I live and the way I raise my kids and the way I contribute to society and the way that I expect my children to contribute to society is different than some of the people who are in my family, but it doesn't make them um, less respectful or it doesn't make me love them less, right? I think that um, as long as people are living in the way that shows love and respect and acceptance of others or for others, you know, I can't say that those values or because they're different than mine. I can't say that there's a breakdown, right? It just depends on the family and how you're raised, what's your foundation. It doesn't because it's different than mine doesn't mean that it's bad or it's wrong.
Okay.
That's a loaded question. I think Quetzy laid it out well. I think I would say that I think because of and COVID's made this even more extreme, is that more of us are isolated, and so I think we just have to find more ways, especially once we all start getting the vaccines and start getting back together, so that we can get back to that family. Making sure we're supporting each other more and just being more intentional about it. A text, yeah, it's nice to be able to communicate with people quick, but it's just not enough. And I know back in the days, like I was at somebody's house on the weekend, just because that's just the way, especially Puerto Ricans back in the days. That's just how it was. It was like you weren't just going to be sitting at home with your own nuclear family. You were going to be at the neighbors, abuelas. So I just think we have to get back to being intentional about supporting each other and just keeping, because that's how we're going to keep. Because I do think we're more aware of the issues, and I think we are more progressive about it. But the more of us that are isolated, especially guys, that maybe just don't feel like they have a lot of future, that they may take that frustration out on their partners. And so, we have to be able to, as family, be able to teach people the right way. And I think we would if we're more intentional about spending time together.
Absolutely. So I want to just make sure we touch on some comments before we close out the show tonight. Christine Lopez is our first comment. It might cover you a little, Ralph.
It's okay.
When domestic abuse is brought up, it's automatically assumed that it's a woman. When they hear it's a man, the facial expression tends to change, and so it makes the men not want to come forward if they're being abused, which is correct. I think that with my organization, I think I've never in my life seen so many men divulge that they have been in a domestic violence relationship and they have been the victim.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's openly discussed. And I have a very close friend in law enforcement. He's actually a supervisor of detectives, and he says he sees it all the time. He has seen men be abused and women be abused. So I think it's something that's super, super scary at the same time, because there's so many men right now who are also going through domestic violence but are afraid to say anything about it. Let's go to our next comment. Ashley Carino says, even females in the police department have no representation if they are abused on the job too. It's corrupt and unorganized. That's pretty scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we see that a lot in like TV, right? You see it in TV. Women are like raped in the police department or in jobs that are mostly male, and they stay shut because of the job that they're in. So that's pretty scary.
We just saw that in Philadelphia, right? We just had supervisors that were reprimanded because of the Me Too
That's right.
movement, right? Where women, especially here in Philadelphia, spoke up against their supervisors, and they were reprimanded for it. But before that, there was no talk about it.
Absolutely. The next one is from Ray, and it's a question for you, Quetzy. Does Philadelphia have enough resources in the city? Does City Hall have knowledge on domestic violence and the proper steps?
I think that yes, there are resources. There are never enough resources dedicated to domestic violence or other issues that kind of are standalone. The city hall, what was that? The city hall know how to handle those types of the proper steps. No, as a constituent services representative, you walk into into a political office to serve constituencies. If you're like me, you walked in, you had no idea what a council person did. I learned as I went on. It was almost like on the job training. I was blessed that I had the opportunity to meet people from Wara, and they made themselves accessible. I met people from Congreso de Latinos Unidos and from the special victims units at Concilio or in the police department, and they were people that served as resources. And so I don't think that that people are trained or it's part of the training or you're not given a book of resources of who you can call. But there are people that make themselves available. It doesn't come with the job.
Okay. Our next two comments are based on what we spoke about with the abuse. I think one of them pertaining to the video. Besides the verbal and physical abuse, he slashed my tires, he harassed me at work, and he chased me down in a car. It wasn't until I was bloody that a judge approved an order of protection, which is the super scary part, right? Because that was her final thought. It wasn't until I was bloody that a judge approved an order of protection. And that was my biggest thing with Senator Casey. Why does a woman have to? And I get that there are so many people who do false allegations. I definitely get that. But why does it have to take that? One of my biggest frustrations in working with this organization is that I get bombarded every day with emails, text messages, phone calls. I mean, every day. So much that I'm like, I need 10 other people who can respond to these emails because all day long I get them. But the most frustrating part is being who I am and giving these people the steps that they need to take. This is where you need to go. This is what you need to do. I will take you. I will go with you. And then I have people who go on their own and they call me back crying and they say, Christina, forget it. I'm not even going to bother. And I'm like, why? I went down to get the emergency protection order and they said, because it happened yesterday and it didn't happen today, that it wasn't an emergency for me to do it that day. I have to wait.
That's terrible.
That's so frustrating to me. And I'll be transparent and say that I told my victims to lie and say it happened that day. I've told them, do not go there and say it happened to you yesterday. If he banged your head into the wall yesterday or he strangled you yesterday and you didn't go because he was still there or he blocked the door, he wouldn't let you leave and you had to go the next day, say it happened today. Because for me, what are you waiting for? So because he didn't do it in that same moment, you're waiting for him to kill her to then say, oh, well, maybe we should have given her that protection order. Like it frustrates me. And that is my biggest thing with with lawmakers, with anyone who can make a real noise about this. Like, we need to change how we work with people on a daily basis, because I may not have a bruise on my face. I may not have a bruise on my body that you can see. That doesn't mean that he didn't kick me in my ribs last night. It doesn't mean that he didn't choke me and hold me up against the wall. So because it didn't happen that evening, it's not an emergency anymore. Well, how about, he didn't do it, but when I get home today, he's waiting with a gun to kill me. But it's not an emergency because it didn't happen today. So that's one of my...
That has to be part of the conversation, though, Chris, right? That has to be part of the conversations when you're talking to people who can make a difference. When you're talking to legislators, they need to know the breakdowns in the system. Right. There's no reason why a PFA can't be served until you're physically assaulted. There's no reason for that. If a woman or a man sees the signs that this person is getting to the point where they're going to hurt me and I feel threatened by them, I should be able to go get a PFA and say, help me before I get hurt. Yeah. Right? It also doesn't help that the DA's office won't approve charges unless the person is served. Why?
Yes.
Why? Yeah. Why are we waiting until there's a tragedy before there's an action?
Yes. That just happened.
It's insane.
The poor woman who was just killed.
People at the table need to know those breakdowns, because people that are legislating sometimes are creating policies and legislations around a specific incident, right? And sometimes they don't get those pieces. Those pieces are left out, right? You go from he abused, this is the situation that happened, and here's the end result, right? I'm shot, I'm broken down, or whatever. But the pieces in between would really change how legislation is written if those pieces are not left out. And so women and men and people who are in this situation need to align themselves with legislators who take a serious interest, and you find strength in numbers, right? It can't be me, you, and her. It has to be 25 of us, or it has to be a coalition of people that say, we need you to address this. And these are the specifics that need to be included in that piece of legislation.
Absolutely. Ralph, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
No, Quetzy said it well. So
Girl can speak.
no doubt. And Miss Shy Girl.
Christine Santos also says, I knew a man who was abused by his wife. They were a part of the upper class, and people would laugh at him when he would recount situations where she hit him. It's a shame that it was a joke, because what she was doing was completely wrong. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why there's so many men who don't. I can't see, and it's because it plays it's like pride as well as just worrying about, just like a woman does, worrying about someone not believing them, especially a man. Like if Ralph were to say, never happened, but Ralph were to say Michelle beats me, I'd probably laugh at it, which is a shame, right? Because you'd be like, she's small, she doesn't touch you. But that's what happens, like
they all are.
That's what happens. Men are not believed as much as women too. So and for everybody that's watching, there are tons of men that are being abused every day, even with just not just hitting, with just the words. They're in relationships where women are demeaning them just like they do with women who are just going through mental and verbal abuse. It's just something that happens. Our last comment was from ZZ. She says yes. And this is something that needs to be brought to light on our on or off the job situations. Absolutely. So it has been an hour and 6 minutes, my people. Every show we do the same thing. We give our guests an opportunity to kind of give their feedback and kind of like a closing out response to what they feel, anything that they feel on the topic at hand. So today's topic was obviously political views and domestic violence. So we're going to go away from the screen because we're going to give you your time to shine one by one. So Quetzy, if I disappear, I'm still here. We're just giving you your time to shine. So ladies first, Quetzy.
Well, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to have me be a part of such an important conversation. Thank you to those who joined us, and for your questions, your comments. They have taught me things that I didn't know, and I knew coming into this conversation that I was going to learn a lot from you, and hopefully I brought some insight to you on this important topic. If you don't walk away with anything, walk away with knowing that that the courage is deep down inside of you, and that it doesn't matter how many times you have to knock on the door to talk about what you're going through. There will be a door that will open, and there is help there. And so take advantage of every opportunity you have, and get the help that you need. And for those who are advocates, make sure that that whatever table you're invited to, that your presence is felt, that your purpose there has been met, and that your message resonates even as you're walking out the door. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So we're going to put you in the green room. Do not leave us. Stay there. We're going to give Ralph the opportunity to give us some closing thoughts on what he feels about our subject matter.
Well, I first want to thank Christina and Quetzy for their leadership in our community around this issue, and for and other people that have been chiming in with their comments. The thing I want to share with you all is that your voice means a lot, and these laws that have been passed and these policies that have been put in place to improve how our society handles domestic violence, they didn't happen out of thin air. They happened because survivors and victims had the courage to speak up, and not just speak up for themselves in their particular case, but to speak up for others that didn't have a voice and felt marginalized, and organize themselves. And look at the impact just this Love Shouldn't Hurt campaign and talk show have made on so many people in our area So it means a lot, and your voice means a lot. So don't feel like, it's hopeless, because I see a lot of hope here, not just with our panel, but with the great feedback that we'll be getting. And I can't wait for Christina to get back on screen, because I have a very big announcement that Christina is a part of. I wanted to share a Love Share Nerd exclusive.
So my eyeballs.
Yes. So actually, I got two. So the first one, bring Quetzy on. So I want to tell her that the first one.
Okay.
So there's a Love Share Nerd exclusive.
Oh wow.
So I have two exclusives. One political, one's not. So the first one is, Quetzy, you and your crew gonna like this one. I can't say the exact details, but I'd say in about a week to 10 days.
Teaser.
There will be an announcement related to me about politics on a national level. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Leave it at that.
I think that's a good thing, though. That always makes me happy.
It's a good thing. But I can't get into it now. But again, the first place that's been teased is Love Share Nerd.
I'm sure it's going to be good.
And then the second thing is, we're going to put a smile on your face, Quetzy. I want to end this with a light note, have some fun smiles. Is that, the event that really, I've been podcasting a long time, really put us on the map, was the first Bomba Live.
Yes.
The virtual Puerto Rico celebration broke all kind of records and everything. And so after feverish negotiation with Christina's management, she has agreed to return for the second annual Bomba Live as my co-executive producer.
That's right.
So we'll be making announcements in the coming weeks about Bomba Live. But needless to say, I had a meeting with a sponsor this morning. Put it this way, Quetzy. Big time celebrities have reached out to me, and Chrissy already has said, I was a part of the first one for a hot minute. I want a bigger role. And some people are like, I wasn't a part of the first one. I want to be. I feel a certain way about that, but now I want to be part of the second one. So, and Q need to be you need to be part of the next one. We need to figure out a role for you.
It was amazing.
You know what I mean?
That is awesome.
So that's gonna be. So we're so you're gonna be seeing on Love Share Nerd and Bomba Live over the next several weeks.
I'll be looking out. I'm going to be looking out.
Special announcements about the legends that are starting to stack up for the next show. No, and besides we love the celebrities and the artists, but we had some for real conversations. You know that shout out to Tina Pasión Zayas. Quetzy, this is a woman very analogous to your role, your life story in Chicago. She worked she was the number 2 for a nonprofit in Chicago. Then she went to work for a mainstream education organization, and she was just tapped to finish the term for another Puerto Rican woman in the Illinois State Senate. Oh, wow. So someone that came on our show in the last several months is now in the State Senate. Another one of our great friends, Alexa Avila, is Boricua from Brooklyn, like the best of the best. He's running for city council. And they've been inspired by being on the show and talking to our other friends like you, Quetzy. So a lot of our people are making moves around the country, and we're going to celebrate all of you guys in June.
Well, and we need more women in government, right? Absolutely. We need more women in government. No doubt. Of you who have been a part of shows like this one, right? Politics is not easy. Politics, not all politics is corrupt. You need good people.
That's right.
At the tables in government in order to keep a lot of people honest and in order to bring change to the community. So please, if you have an opportunity to get involved in city, local, municipal, federal, all levels of government, we need more Latino representation. Yes. We need more women representation.
No question
so please support your women legislators, give to women legislators, hold women legislators accountable, yes. And make sure that you get your families to do the same.
Absolutely. No doubt.
So I want to thank you both again for being a part of today. We had to have a political conversation, and if I didn't have it without you two, then it was not a real political conversation. Yeah. I want you guys to sit back in the green room. We will be back to say goodbye, but I'll give my closing thoughts. As per usual, I want to thank everybody for being here. You guys are an amazing audience. You always give some amazing feedback, so respectful of our guests, and always just encouraging. So thank you all for doing that. I want to remind everyone of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. As per always, when we close out our show, I want everyone who is watching who needs help, reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. If you cannot speak on the phone, remember that they can chat and they can text if you cannot physically say anything to them. 1-800-799-7233. You can also reach out to us at loveshouldnothurt.com. All of our social media outlets one person or myself from our team will reach out to you as quickly as we can. And as I always say, if we do not have the proper answers to your questions, we will find the person that you will need. Thank you all so much for being here. I think it's super important for us to focus on the things that we're passionate about. I'm super passionate on making moves, especially in our legislate, Senate, everywhere. We're not just doing Philly, people. Love Shouldn't Hurt is continuing to expand, because I think that these are things that are needed at the table. Domestic violence is something that was not spoken about. I've now started speaking about it, and I'm not stopping. I started and I'm not going anywhere. So if you're sick of hearing me, too bad. It happened to me. We lost a good person because of this, and we lose good people every day. So as Quetzy and Ralph stated, if you ever have the opportunity to sit at the table with somebody important who is there and able to make the moves, make your voice heard. Let them hear what you have to say. Let them know how passionate you feel about it, and don't shut up until somebody does something about it. Huge announcement at the end of every show. We just would say goodbye, right? Well, now we're starting to make you have something to look forward to. So we held a male's perspective on domestic violence, and we've had so many adults come on and talk about it. And we've had my daughter come on and talk about how she feels as a child who's lived through domestic violence. And we've had so many different topics. But next week, we are going to have an amazing group of young teens who are going to talk about how they feel about domestic violence. So look forward to next week's show. There's our flyer for next week. We have Alina, Renaya, Imani, and Ava who are joining us, all girls, who are going to tell us as teenagers who are now in 2021 and who have their own voices and their own perspectives on domestic violence. They're going to sit down and they're going to talk to us and tell us how they feel. So look forward to that next week at 7 p.m. Thank you all for coming. You guys can come back on the screen, join me. I want to say thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great and amazing evening. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.